Alright, I'm finally back. Been a bit busy the last few weeks. Anyway, let's get to it. How do diesel trains work? Where do we start? How about this? What is diesel? Diesel is a saturated hydrocarbon. Basically, carbon and hydrogen, with no space for more hydrogen, and specifically straight lines between 10 and 15 carbons long. So none of this funky stuff. Anyway, diesel. What is so special about these molecules? There's energy in these molecules, in their bonds, the connections between the atoms, and they'd rather be with oxygen than each other, which is convenient as we have lots of oxygen in the air. But why isn't the diesel doing anything? So what's up with this? In order to react, the reactants, the diesel and oxygen, need to hit each other with enough energy that they break apart. This is activation energy, but as they come back together, we get water and carbon dioxide instead, which have less energy in their bonds, and that extra energy, that is released as heat. And this is what we're going to make the train move with. Now, how can we reach activation energy? Alright, ideal gas flow time. So here's that. This tells us that if either we decrease the volume or increase the pressure of some gas, the temperature is going to rise. And that temperature is the average kinetic energy of the particles. So more particles will be above the activation energy and able to react. So let's get a container, put in our air and some fuel. We need a lot more air than fuel, so we decrease the volume. The fuel-air mix gets hotter and hotter until it all reacts, giving us way more heat. But as we discussed before, a high temperature will mean a high pressure, creating a force on the walls of the container. And that wall we used to compress the gas, the piston head, that's going to be forced back, increasing the volume, and the reaction is complete. But we need to turn the up and down motion of the piston into a rotation we can use for the wheels. We just need to add a bar onto this with a hinge at the top and connect it to the outside of a wheel where the connection can freely rotate. And now we're getting the fuel to turn the wheel about once. Right, how do we solve this? It's actually quite simple. Just add more pistons. When one gets stuck at the bottom, the other can pull it up. This way we can keep the wheel spinning as long as we want, with a few quick changes to the piston. Just valves to allow fuel in and exhaust out. We can continuously burn fuel and spin this wheel. Now, to make it more efficient, as we said earlier, we need a lot more air compared to fuel. So the limiting factor on how much power we can get out of the engine is how much air we can get into the cylinder. Now, how can we put more air in the same space? Increased pressure, of course. We can compress the intake air to fit more in, and this is where the next part of the engine comes in, the turbocharger or supercharger, but we'll get onto that in a bit. We can use a fan to force air into the combustion chamber. This is forced induction, and there's actually a cool way to power this fan. The exhaust gases are hot, which means they still have plenty of energy, so we can just run them through a turbine and use that same energy to compress the intake gas. This is turbocharging and allows more power to come from an engine of the same size, but of course it isn't perfect. When initially accelerating, the exhaust gases aren't quite hot enough yet. This is turbo lag, where we don't get that extra power right away, where it's probably most needed. The alternative is to use the actual engine to spin that turbine. This is supercharging, but that'll take power away from the wheels. Anyway, there's another way that we can cram more air into the cylinder. By lowering the temperature of the intake air, we decrease its volume, meaning more can fit in the cylinder. This can be difficult, especially when we are making so much heat, but there's a few ways to cool the engine. We can use fans or liquid cooling, or I'm sure there's other ways. By doing this, we can also prevent the engine from overheating and damaging itself. That's how a diesel engine on a train works, and we'll get onto transmission in the next video. Subscribe so you don't miss out on that, and if you're interested, we have a Discord server. Link is in the description, and I'll see you when the next video's out.